Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Popcorn Podcast with Leigh and Tim. We have a very special episode with some very special guests today as Michael Shannon and John Slattery join us to talk about their new film, Nuremberg.
I'm Timmy Flynn, film expert.
And I'm Leigh Livingstone, entertainment journalist.
And we love to talk all things movies. And like Leigh said, we've got a very special episode for you, friends. Okay, so in Nuremberg, the Allies, led by the unyielding chief prosecutor Robert H. Jackson, have the task of ensuring the Nazi regime answers for the horrors of the Holocaust, while a US Army psychiatrist is locked in a dramatic psychological duel with Hermann Göring, the second most powerful Nazi under Hitler.
Nuremberg is written and directed by James Vanderbilt, and it stars Russell Crowe, Rami Malek, Michael Shannon, Richard E. Grant, Leo Woodall, John Slattery, Mark O'Brien, Colin Hanks. I could go on and on. Lydia Peckham, Ren Schmidt, Andreas Pietschmann.
What an incredibly stacked cast indeed. Okay, so today on Popcorn Podcast, we sit down with two extraordinary talents, Michael Shannon and John Slattery, to talk about their powerful new film, Nuremberg, inspired by the real-life events that reshaped modern justice.
In Nuremberg, Michael Shannon stars as US Supreme Court Justice Robert H. Jackson, the man who left the bench to lead the prosecution against Nazi war criminals in the first international tribunal of its kind. And meanwhile, John Slattery portrays Colonel Burton Andrus, the US Army warden who is tasked with overseeing the captured Nazi leaders during this trial.
It's a film of incredible historical weight and human insight, led by an award-winning ensemble that also includes Rami Malek and Russell Crowe as Hermann Göring.
But beyond the courtroom, Nuremberg explores something deeper, which is how ordinary men can commit extraordinary evil and how humanity, in the wake of unimaginable horror, sought to understand itself again.
We have been making a lot of references to General Zod from Man of Steel being on the podcast, but Michael Shannon is, of course, so much more than the iconic villain.
He is an Oscar nominee known for unforgettable turns in Revolutionary Road, Take Shelter and The Shape of Water, as well as Knives Out, Bullet Train and The Bikeriders.
Incredible filmography. Michael brings a quiet moral fire to Jackson, a man who believed that even the perpetrators of history's greatest crimes must be tried under law, not vengeance.
And meanwhile, John Slattery is best known to many as the sharp Roger Sterling from Mad Men, or you might know him as Victor Lang in Desperate Housewives. And of course, we know him as Tony Stark's father, Howard Stark, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But let me tell you, the real ones remember him as Carrie's politician boyfriend with a very particular fetish in Sex and the City.
Now, that's called range.
Exactly.
Okay, so here he takes on one of the most intense roles yet, balancing military command with quiet torment. And in our conversation, he reveals that to truly understand his character's perspective, he traveled to Auschwitz during filming.
Both actors speak candidly here about the weight of depicting real historical figures, the moral questions that haunted them from being on set, and why stories like Nuremberg still really matter today.
Let's take a listen.
The world needs to know what these men did.
Michael, John, great to meet you both.
Well, hey, Tim.
Hey.
The Nuremberg trials represent a time when humanity attempted to understand itself, and from my perspective, the film is such a triumph in honouring that. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
As actors playing real historical figures, how important is it to you both in exercising, I guess, your own creative liberties in finding your characters while also keeping your performances true to the real people that you're portraying? I might start with you, Michael.
Oh gosh, well, I'm a fiend for authenticity and trying to follow. I mean, otherwise, I don't get a kick out of changing things really just for my own, as we say in the States, shits and giggles. The story is so much more interesting than any version of it I would make up. So I think in terms of creative liberties, that's probably above my pay grade. You know, that's probably the writer or the director. But for me, I'm doing as much research as I can. I'm finding out as much as I can about the person that I'm representing out of respect for them, because as far as I'm concerned, Robert Jackson accomplished a lot more in his life than I ever will.
And what about for you, John?
The character I played wrote a book as well, so I read that and as much, source material as I could. But I think to echo Mike, it isn't, I mean, the story isn't about the guy I played. And so you're just trying to sort of pick elements of the character that will best contribute to telling the story. So whether it's the level of gravity or authority or whatever is needed to sort of fill the role of telling that story.
Mm.
Yeah, and there's also the responsibility to be respectful of the actual person.
Just to pull on your point, John, about like pulling the pieces or the bits, I really love the small details in a film that help an audience understand a character a bit more deeply. Was there a small detail of your characters, either seen or unseen on screen, that was important to your performance in finding them, Michael?
I was fascinated to learn in my research that Robert Jackson never finished law school, which is pretty incredible considering how far he went in his career. But it spoke to a tenacity I believe he possessed and a kind of native intelligence that he possessed. But it also could conceivably be considered his Achilles heel in certain aspects, particularly as brilliant a legal mind as he had. He was somewhat uncomfortable in the courtroom, actually during a questioning or during a trial. That was his one stumbling block, which is on display in the film. You can see him struggling with that. But yeah, I just admire his relentless pursuit of justice. Despite all the obstacles that were in his way and the opposition to the trials from people that were his superiors.
And for you, John, with the Colonel, like he does tend to have in moments like that peacock type of, bravado. But how in your performance did you want to make sure that he was layered and nuanced and a real person beyond just that?
Yeah, he one of the things he did in a lot of the pictures that I saw was that he would wear like a chrome helmet and George Patton wore. But I thought, if there were time to explain that, or you see more sides of him that would sort of complement that, then it would be useful. But we decided to dispense with that because, again, didn't want to get in the way of the rest of the story. Like what that would have been a distraction. I mean, I felt the obligation to sort of show where the intensity or the anger or the fuel came from. And I hadn't had any experience with any of this. So I thought the logical thing to do was to go see for myself. So I had 10 days off. I think we were in Budapest and I went to Auschwitz just to see for myself because I had all these scenes where he clearly felt strongly about this, his position. And so I did that and it was overwhelming and it doesn't really, there's no way to describe it. It just,
Yeah.
I felt it would be important to see it and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, I haven't been myself, but that's a common response is the presence of not being able to find the words. And just to pull on your experience of going to Auschwitz, there's this very long and confronting imagery of the concentration camp atrocities shown in the film. And even though it's been more than 80 years, it's still no less shocking to witness. And I'm just curious, you guys as actors versus human beings, like your own person, was it hard to separate how you would react as your character as opposed to you, watching that imagery?
Yeah, I found that particular setup very unnerving. Like the idea of, acting or performing while you're watching this footage. It kind of got in my head a little bit, which frankly is why I think you don't see me during that. I introduced the footage and then you don't see me again. And I was kind of relieved about that because I was having a real philosophical conundrum in my mind. But it's something you very rarely get to see in a film is actors responding to actual reality. It's kind of a Mobius strip, but that footage is some of the most horrifying footage I've ever laid eyes on in my lifetime, that's for sure.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. In wrapping up one final piece, the end of the film references a quote from R.G. Collingwood, that reads, "The only clue to what man can do is what man has done," which is a very profound way to end this film. Why is it so important to recount history through art and to continue to do that?
I think the relevance is pretty plain. I mean, to what's happening right now. I think Rami's character brings up the idea that, what's whether you call it the banality of evil, or what's the difference between someone who would perpetrate something like that and someone who would stand by and witness it and allow it to happen. I mean, Jamie's been working on this material for a long time, so it's sort of remarkable that it's coming into the world now, because, the parallels are pretty obvious.
It's like you hear it time and again in the film, whether you hear it from Goering or whether you hear it from Robert Jackson in his opening statement. We are in this story, in this trial, condemning the Nazis, but this kind of behavior, whoever and whenever it's displayed, should always be admonished and condemned and punished.
Thank you both. Thank you for your work and bringing this film to audiences and telling this story. It's really important, and it's a really fantastic movie. Congratulations again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You are standing inside a military prison. It currently houses what's left of the Nazi high command.
That was such a powerful message from Michael Shannon at the end there, where he said, we're condemning the Nazis in this story, but this kind of behaviour must always be condemned and punished.
It's crazy to think that crimes against humanity from some 80 years ago still hit home today.
Still happen.
What are we seeing? Yeah, still happening. It is insane, which further proves the point that, through art, retelling history through films and such is so important for us to hopefully one day learn from our mistakes.
And not repeat them, exactly.
Not repeat them, indeed.
Nuremberg is in Australian cinemas from December 4.
It's always a privilege to have you, friends. Thank you so much for joining us for this interview episode with Michael Shannon and John Slattery.
We'll catch you next time.
Did you know we're on YouTube, where you will find our latest celebrity video interviews? Simply search Popcorn Podcast with Leigh and Tim and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the fun.